In honor of the Armed Forces Away from Family, Jane Averill, Paula Bissonette, Tony Dembinski, Glenn Hinckley, Pauline Kirshner, Sarah Phillips, Sumner Fire Department Auxiliary, Sumner Volunteer Firemen, Paulette Tabb, the firefighters who risk their lives and answer our calls for help any hour of the day or night to keep our community safe, to the glory of God, and Kathy Weeks.
In memory of Janice Lowe, Howard Lowell, John Lowell, Connie Lucas Irish, Malcolm McEwen, Miriam McEwen, David Total Maines, Louis Marstaller, Clarabelle Marstaller, Tony Morrow, Mark McAllister, Kathleen McCluskey, Teresa McClutchin, Jan McGowan, Charles McClellan, Nathan Merrill, Catherine Missouri,
Diana Mills, Janice Mills, Mom, Una Morrill, Alfred Morrill, Merlin Morrill, Patrick Myers, Einza Myers, Doug Nice, Beverly Newton, Richard Newton, Rob Nixon, Calvin Norton, Marjorie Norton, Lisa Marie Norton, Helen O'Brien, Jeanette O'Neill, Dan O'Neill. Our fallen members move to Eternal Station 333. Thea Palanza Hanud, Nick Palladino, Archie Parody, Patty Pelletier, Howard Perkins, Philip Perry, Brenda Perry, Jesse Charles Filbert Sr., Janet Pomerleau, Roland Pomerleau, David Pomerleau, Alex Pond, Rick Ramsey, Brenda P. Rand, Bob Raymond, Jack Raymond, Mary Reed, Russell Rennie, Elsie Richards, Raymond Richards Sr., Donnie Richardson, Irene Richardson, Don Richardson Sr., Mary Robinson, Mike Ross, Claire Rouliard, Barbara Rowe, Earl Rowell, Marjorie Rowell, Merv Rowland, Frida Runes, Max Runes, Bob Russell, Hazel Russell, Robert Russell Sr., Audrey Sawyer, Ann Shannon, Mike Shaheen, Robert Sheldon, Mary Sheldon, Terry Silver, Frank Smith, David Smith, Calvin Smith, Kevin Stanley, Ada Mae Stevens, Dwight Stevens, Edith Stevens, Howard Stevens, Steve Stevens, James Stevens, Douglas Stevens, Darwin Stevens, Callista Stevens, Stanley Stevens, Darwin Stevens, Myron Stratton, Lucille Stratton, Carl Straub, Kim Strout, Graham Velma Thompson, Marion Tripp, Lucy Valletta Simpson, Bump Barney, Alice Barney, Greg Barney, Betty Walder, Bob Walder, Joey Walker, Richard Walker, Mac Wallace, Timothy Wallace.
John Allen, Bruce Abbott, Elma Abbott, Lillian Abbott, Geraldine Abbott, Sidney Abbott Jr., Sidney M. Abbott Sr., Alden Acker, Cornea Ackley, Dustin Adamson, George Todd Affleck, Claire Ackers, all the tiny babies and fur babies that have passed, Olive Allen, Darcy Ames, Reverend Maurice Amnott, Louise Aris, Jean Aris, Ron Eseltine, Harper Grace Averill, Eddie Averill, Randy Bagwell, Billy Bagwell, Gary Bartlett, Eleanor Bean, Herbert Beanie and Eleanor Bean, Norm Beaulieu, Dale Bennett, Roger Bennett, Moose Berry, Edith Berry, Margaret Berry, Bill Berry, Jay Berry, Tricia Berry, Tim Begonski Dada, Dennis Byron, Clint Bisbee, Shirley Bonney, Corey Bonney, Owen Bonney, Corey Jr. Bonney, Sean Bouchard, Ray Bradeen, Vernon Bradeen, Charlotte Bradeen, Karen Bradeen Russell, Dickie Bragg, Eddie Bragg, Iva Bragg, Frank Bragg, Richard Bragg, Tom Bragg Jr., Tom Bragg Sr., Wayman Brown, Enzo Brunn, Willie Buffington, Percy and Pat Butler, Joan Campbell, Fred Campbell, David Capon, Beverly Capon, Grace Chesley, Alfred Chesley, Horace Cobb, Tom Cochran, Edna Cochran, Connie Coffin, Kenneth Cole, Beulah Cole, Dorothy M. Connell, Kenneth P. Connell, Charlie W. Connell, Rita Corriveau, Marcel Corriveau, Lisa Corriveau, Mike Corriveau, Phyllis Corson, Brenda Cox, Jerry Cox, Roland Cullens, Hattie Curtis, Galen Curtis, Patricia Curtis, Ernest Curtis, Lucy Curtis, Ava Curtis Felton, Callista Curtis Morgan, Doug Dane, Kevin Dillingham, Jeff Dillingham, Marion Dillingham, Nelson Pedro Dillingham, Ron Dillingham, Lenny Dillingham, Martha Douglas, Patricia Dube, Tim Dunham, Edna Dunham, Robert Dunn, Chris Dunn, Ted Durant, Jim Durfee, Elmer Durgan, Augusta Eastman, Albert Eastman, Irene Eastman, John and Karen Ellis, Herb Ellis, Stanley Estes, Helen Estes, Brenda Estes, Edgar Everett, Gail Farr, Gerald Farah, Gertrude Farah, Eugene Farah.
Arlen Farrer, Lee Farrer, Helen Farrer, Maynard Farrer, Augustus Farrer, Amy Farrer, Arlen Farmer, Farrer, Gertrude Farrer, Ashland Farrer Jr., Arlen Farrer Sr., Robert Farrer Sr., Rex Felton, Eva Felton, Mary Fitzgerald, Alice Foss, Delma Foss, Judy Foster, Dorothy Fournier, Sue Fournier, Matt Fournier, Theodore Fournier Jr., Sherry Fowler, David Frenchell, Sarah Elizabeth Freno, Brad Gallant, Roger W. Gammon, Burl M. Gammon, Nicole C. Gammon, Bun and Doris Gammon, Helen Guberlit, Al Guberlit, Dustin Gross, Jamie Gross, Carol Hadley, Erlon Hadley, Nettie Hall, Wally Hammack, Jerry Hammack, Zelda Hammond, Erland Hammond, Rosemary Harmon, Sheila Harrington, Gary Lee Haynes, Arlene Haynes, Marlon Hazelton, Eugene Hazelton, Hiram Hazelton, Dora Hazelton, George Healy, Marion Hefner, Ted and Eleanor Heydrich, Stuart Henderson, Jared Henderson, Beverly Henry, James Henry, Evelyn Herrick, Eddie Herrick Sr., Hezzy and Edward Herrick Sr., Lee Huey, Mary Hicks, Kenny Hill, Cindy Hinckley, Clarabelle Hinshaw, Everett Hinshaw, Ashley Hoffman Gilbert, Jack and Joanne Holt, Richard Howard, Irene Jackson, Gardner Jackson, Gary Jackson, Gardner Jr. Jackson, Terry Jackson, Diane Jackson, Lou Jacobs, Charlotte Jacobson, Kenneth Jelvier Jalbert, Uslid Jalbert, Jean Jalbert, Grandmother Jean, Brenda Jesleski Hard Hadley, John Grampy Julian, Arthur Kangas, Louise Kangas, Leland Kangas, Stephen Kangas, Dolores Kiefreiter, Evelyn Kenny, John Kursky, Jeannie Kilponen, Mark Kilponen, Paul Kirschner, Linda Klein, Bill Klein, Todd Kowalski, Carolee Landry, Birch Lane, Jackie Lassard, George Levitt, Frank Lengiel, Pat Libby, Kevin Litchfield, Wayne Litchfield, Walter Litchfield, Carolyn Litchfield, Lorraine Litchfield, Susan Litchfield, Wayne Litchfield, Larry Litchfield Sr., Brian Locke, Clifford Lowe.
Walter Litchfield, Susan Wallace, Maureen Watkins, Ruth Watkins, Bill Weatherby, Mary Weatherby, Lincoln Weeks, Whiskey the Black Mountain Road Cat, Irene White, Bob White, Weston White, Marilyn White, Vernon Wilcox, Nadine Wilcox, Florence Wilcox, Andrew Wilson, Danny Wing, Pat Wing, Joyce Wing, Punk Wing, Scott Wing, Kenneth Wing, Nelson Wing, Joyce Wing, Nelson Wing Sr., Francis Woodard, Michael Young, Fancy, and Mom and Dad.